All right. Robert's last question to me before I hit the record button was, who's going to have egg on their face? Real Estate Chat, welcome. Robert Eid, Jonder Perez. And on this episode, we're going to talk about the blip. Sales are fading. What's going to happen next? Robert, what's going on?
Indeed. Hi. Yeah, we've just had last month's results, April, discussed at great length by everybody who thinks they know about real estate, because the Canadian Real Estate Association puts out their cross-Canada summary on the 15th of every month. And so then Scotiabank puts out, and everybody talks about it and everything like that. And so that's very interesting to learn on the 15th of May what happened in April, but that's over. And so I'm going to say with 75% certainty that, or before I was 50% certain, that we had a blip in March and April, and it's over. Blip in sales, which pushed the prices up.
And we're going to have a look at the charts momentarily, but I guess the main thing to ask is, was this expected? Is this normal? Is this something to be concerned about? Or is it just what happens in real estate on a year-to-year basis?
Well, in the spring, everybody gets spring fever. And as I've said repeatedly, without abashment, that's a word, you get a new car, you get a new girlfriend, you get a new house. And a certain number of people last year did nothing, and they had to do something. And so when they saw the least bit of encouragement of a pause in interest rates, they say, okay, well, I can do something with interest on my mortgage for 2 years until this cycle goes over. So I'll buy now, because as soon as the rates go down, prices are going to go back up again. And so the thing that surprised me, what do I know about anything, is that there were not a glut of homeowners putting their property for sale in the spring of 2023. And I had said that when that happens, then that glut, supply and demand, will push the prices down because everyone will be competing with each other. Instead, grandma didn't sell her house. And so the people who did want to buy, who thought there was an advantage in buying it in March of 2023, had to bid on the existing inventory that was diminished. And I believe the tremendous influence of the underlisting strategy came into play, where if you get 15 offers on a house that you had for sale for 4 or 14 days, and you've been waiting to present offers, and only 3 of them are up in the stratosphere where you thought they were going to be, then it gives a false sense to everybody reporting anecdotally on the 15 offers on multiple offers, because nobody knows what the other offers are. And if you're someone who's cautiously proceeding and you see something for $799, you say, well, okay, I'll put an offer in on that for $805, and then you see it sells for $905, you say, wow, what happened? Were they all even? You just don't know. So there's a noise afoot to change the real estate, the renamed Real Estate and Business Brokers Act, to allow, at the option of the seller, to have open bidding, where those participants, if you've registered an offer and you have submitted one, then you will be privy to maybe the price, maybe some other details, maybe a lot of the details, save and except for the identity of the buyer, and make the process more open. Now, if I was a seller, I wouldn't want that, but you can see how someone who's implementing something based on what they did in British Columbia might say, oh, well, that's a good idea, and we'll make it an optional thing. And then they make it optional for any buyer who doesn't like that to opt out of it. It's one of these things where they're doing it after the fact, much like this nonsense about coming soon. They're addressing coming soon by getting rid of exclusive listings as a strategy. So we live in a complicated world, and we adapt, and we find how they adapt, and stuff like that. So,
and we'll find out. This is one of those time will tell, because one of the constant back and forth discussions, which we'll cover in a future episode of Real Estate Chat, so make sure you subscribe, is would somebody end up paying more when all of the prices are displayed and transparent versus if it was blind bidding? So that's something Robert and I will talk about in a later episode. But for today's episode, let's bring up the charts here up on screen, and we're talking about what May will look like in a couple of, well, we're about halfway done with May, but here's where we're sitting right now. Robert, take us away with your forecast of where sales are headed. And no surprise that, of course, at some point sales will dwindle down. Give us a bit of narrative as to what's going on with May.
Well, everything is compared to what? So we are now, and it's got worse since I did this a few days ago. This is at 5,700 sales projected for the month of May, which, you know, the second half may all of a sudden go crazy, but been going steadily down for a week. Anyway, so now we're the 26th out of 28 best May. And we can see we're about 25% above May of 2020, which was sort of like a lousy time. Nothing was happening and we were all locked down. So we're back to where we were. If we go up to the orange yellow box at the top, we're 40% off normal and 50% off maximum and 20% off, you know, last year. So it's not, you know, this is where we were in the doldrums of the year. The regular November, December, January, February were the same, 40% off and 30% off. And so now we go back to that, which means we had 2-month period in March and April when we were 10% off the levels that the sales levels, the number of units traded that we were in average. We're still nowhere near average, but is much improved. So the effect on prices, again, has been moderated by or influenced by the small number of new listings and the tremendous number of no offers right away. And so we will have a bidding war, and we will have it in a few days. And if you want to buy something and you lost the last one, you better bid strong. It's a whole psychology that if prices are constantly going up is fine, because that's what everybody's doing. Now, if everybody's doing and there's no reason to do it, then buyers are just getting sucked into it. So I'm going to say that if you're a buyer, don't bid over the asking price. Don't play the game anymore and see what happens.
Well, there you go, and see what happens. Meaning, will you end up getting it at some point if prices adjust, or will you never win because of prices inching up higher? But that's going to be something that you experience out there in the field. And is it fair to presume, Robert, that we'll see a discontinuous dip into the summer, because that's what we've come to expect anyway? And then should we see a somewhat decent sales season this coming fall? Like, will we see a rise again in the fall, just like we normally do?
Well, this is where we say that sales, supply, demand, and consumer confidence. Yes, you got interest rates and then outside influences control the real estate market. Residential real estate is influenced by everything. The strongest influence in nature is to do nothing, inertia. And so people will do nothing unless they're motivated to get off the nothing. And so nobody can say that. If we end up having an average year number of sales, big deal. If we're 10% under, big deal. If we're not going to be over an average year. So everybody just has to be a little bit smarter than they have been doing and not listen to anybody other than their own heart and their own situation. It's not a speculative industry. Residential real estate is not a speculative investment. It's not really an investment except for a 25-year deal.
And these figures that we show is to show you and give you a gauge and educate you on what's happening in the marketplace. And of course, when you're looking at things such as average price, doesn't mean you can buy a home that's necessarily at the average price. You may be buying at that price range, higher or lower. And these trends just paint a big picture of what it looks like all over. But you've got to be sure that you're working with somebody in your local market that has a pulse on what's happening in your specific neighborhood. Let's look at this point of view here. Which is, again, you call it your simplified estimated May 2023, and then comparing it with the averages and, relative to previous years.
And what should be mentioned here is that there's a pink and a green line that run through the middle, which show the 5 and 10-year average. Now, the 5-year is very much lower for these couple of months than the 10-year, because that includes the 2020 results, which were far, 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 far below any average. So I've been now omitting, for these 2 months, I've been omitting the 2020 and May and April number. And so I've got a 4-year average referenced above. And so the 4 and your 5-year are very similar, even though that number that's on there, or the pink line is very much below the green one, and that's because of the influence of this one year we see here 66 and 56% below the regular average. So that was a impossible to duplicate situation, and we're not going to compare to that anymore in April and May. But it's the same thing. We're 44% off of a hot market, which I'm saying 2017 is an example of a hot market with around 10,000 sales, because we're having like 5,000 sales, maybe 6,000 we'll get to, but probably more like 5,500. And that is 42% off the 5 and 10 year average. So it's not great. It's the third lousiest, let's call it, May that we've ever had. But everybody thinks it is rah, 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 because last month certainly was much better at being the 20th better.
Yeah, it's the recency point of view, right? So when you see what's happening in the last month, and then all of a sudden a dip happens, you think it's a very drastic thing. But interesting to point out that more or less, Robert, I mean, you can look at this as the level of confidence in the market, but there's also, you have the supply demand situation, and relative to what the inventory is available out there, you're going to get, of course, a sales number out of it. And what do you foresee or forecast in terms of, here's where averages are, here's our current situation, high interest rates, in spite of low inventories, people are buying, like buyers are still buying.
Yeah.
What would it have to take in terms of the market shifting or transitioning, whatever word you like to use, in order for us to return to, let's say, average 5-10 year levels?
Oh, well, prices come down 20% or interest rates come down by 2%. Which we were saying all the way along, except they're not going to drop interest rates because they're going to double down on that. And everybody's going to be real surprised how, they give cost of living allowance, civil servants, 12% going back a year, 40 year, 4%. Like, what are you trying to tell people? What are you trying to tell people about the future expectations? It's not going to be 2%. So, you tell lies until you can't tell lies anymore. It's what statisticians do.
So let's look at the school year point of view of this chart.
Okay, well, we were charting the regular pattern until recently. Now we've dived down way below, which, we've said already, just that this shows you the December, January, where all of our attention was been, oh, how bad it is. And a nice build up in the spring, but still way below all these other years. This is going back to 2021 and 01. All the years are above us. All the years are above us, following the same pattern. But if there's 5,000 sales a month, it's great if it's December. It's not great if it's May. And we'll see what happens in June, July, and August. But I have a feeling that we're going to, everybody likes to be right. I was wrong for 2 months, that we're going to have a dragged out adjustment, unboom, what goes up must come down, market for the rest of this year. And depending on how long it takes to fiddle with interest rates, and who knows what the American and what the world situation is going to be in all these various different areas beyond Toronto.
Well, I mean, let's hope something, again, hope is whatever, but it's subjective to whatever you feel about the market. But this looking at this point of view makes it look much more profound how much of a drop that is when you're looking first at what December's, like the December, January looks like.
But each month's average was also lower. We're looking at the average, that red going across. That's what normally it is for May, like nearly 10,000, and we're at half that. So, or 40% off. So it's hard when your best month is not your best month.
And time will tell. So keep an eye out on this market update when we release it in early June, first week of June, a real estate chat episode. Make sure you click on subscribe so that you see when that comes out. But final takeaways from this, Robert, what's your advice to buyers and sellers in the next coming weeks?
Well, we borrow a stock market phrase, which is sell in May and go away, where they mean that to mean that if you're holding something and you're worried about it at all, sell it in May and go on vacation and don't worry about it, and then think about it again when you come back from the cottage in September. And If you want to buy something, you may find that there's good opportunities to come forward in about 2 months. But nobody changes their mind in 5 days or in 5 minutes. And so watch the report that comes out analyzing May, which will come out some around the middle of June, and you may find it completely backwards to what they said 3 days ago about April.
All right. Well, there you have it. If you have any questions about what you've just seen, make sure you type it, questions or comments or feedback, agree, disagree, type it into the chat. If you like this episode, click like. If you disliked it, just click dislike. That's okay too. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode of Real Estate Chat. Bye for now.
See you later.